Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
Cancer and hair loss was probably the most difficult, at least emotional thing that I'd gone through. Like I said, I was a single lady and all of a sudden I find out, hey, you have beautiful shoulder length hair at the time. And one of my nurses said, that's going to come out in the next few weeks. And I just want you to know one of the medicines you're taking will cause your hair to come out. So you need to get prepared for that. So, of course, I was shocked or devastated at that. And what I ended up deciding to do is just really take control of it. And I think that's a great lesson for the listeners is control what you can in a crisis, right? When things are happening to you, there's a lot of things or a lot of times that things are out of your control. But if you can look at what's within my control and control what you can.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. Join your hosts, Billy and Brian, a couple of average dudes who will serve as your armchair life coaches as we share our life experiences, both the good and the bad, in an effort to help us all better understand how we can enjoy and make the most of the life we have left to live in a more meaningful way. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with us through the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy. Brian is at his company holiday party, so I imagine he is feeling joyous today, which is rather fitting because our guest today is Joy Huber. Joy is a stage 4 young cancer survivor who has gone on to become an award-winning international speaker and author of the book Cancer with Joy. Joy also shares her personal experiences and extensive knowledge of facing cancer in her podcast, Dose of Joy, which she launched in time for Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October 2021. Dose of Joy comes out each week, and Joy shares helpful information, support, and inspiration for those facing cancer or supporting a loved one with cancer. And today she is going to share how she confronted her own mortality, kicked cancer's ass, and reinvented her life. Welcome to the show, Joy Huber.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're so glad that you could make it today. So, Joy, we like to have our guests talk about the 10 roles that they play in their life. So what are the 10 roles that you play in your life?
Yeah, so the 10 roles I play, first and foremost, what we're going to be talking about today, stage 4 cancer survivor. And that has really morphed into becoming a guide to cancer who's been there. So we'll talk about the number of people I hear from now. Whenever someone they know has been diagnosed with cancer, my friend tends to reach out to me and they want me to help this other person that they know that I don't know and serve as a guide. So first and foremost, that really I feel I found my life's passion, and mission and purpose, and maybe why I was diagnosed at such a young age, so I'd be able to help so many others who also received that diagnosis. I think statistics tell us 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will actually face cancer, unfortunately, at some point in their life. And what I really found was no one's happy they have cancer, obviously, but you can have cancer and still be happy. And that's what we'll be getting into is how in the heck do you do that?
It reminds me of what one of our guests, Scott Welly, said. He said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. So it sounds like you were faced with this crisis of cancer and you have turned it into a positive. So we're really looking forward to it. You also put down a podcast host. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I used to be a professional speaker. Pre-COVID, I would travel all over the country and even internationally, giving seminars, speaking on business topics and soft skills. And I would get awesome evaluations. And so that just made me feel really good about the number of people I could help. You think at the end of the day, people are going to want to get out of there. And instead, a line would form and people would come up and they'd want to talk to me. And they'd say, I was really dreading this day. my boss wants me to go to this seminar, and I thought it was going to be the most boring thing. And they would say, I'm so glad I came to your seminar because A, I learned, but B, I surprisingly had fun. They're like, you're so energetic and positive, upbeat, kind of infectious, I guess you could say, in a good way, hopefully, where, I just transfer enthusiasm and knowledge to others. But of course, when I got diagnosed with cancer, I ended up suspending my business because I didn't want to be in front of a crowd speaking and have those treatment side effects, the nausea and all of that kind of hit and be like, okay, hang on 1 minute here. You can't really leave the stage and come back if you're not feeling well. And so I'd just been looking at technology and how could I morph and still share my energy, my positive attitude, my knowledge. And podcasting has come up in the ranks. And so just got the idea, like I said, with COVID, when you can't be out and about, maybe with people, how can I still get it to them? And I hear from people, they're listening in the car, they're driving to chemo, they're listening at chemo is what I'm finding, because it's really soothing for them to hear that kind of comforting voice of someone who they know has been there. So I'm not a medical doctor. My master's is actually in health communication, but I'm really coming at it as that voice who's been there, who truly wants to help others.
Yeah, and you have some other roles listed here too. Tell us about these other roles.
Yeah. So another role I mentioned, you touched on in the intro, is I did author a book. I authored a book called Cancer with Joy. And that has, of course, a very literal as well as figurative meaning to it. So it's facing cancer with joy, literally with me, a woman named Joy, as your guide who's been there, but also figuratively facing cancer with joy. We've all heard the quote, laughter is the best medicine. And I was reminded of that shortly after my diagnosis and tried to really employ that. And we've also heard mind over matter. And you're probably aware, Billy, of all the body of research and evidence out there about the power of the mind-body connection. So it's kind of our thoughts become things. And what we think is a lot of times what ends up happening. And so I just ask crowds when I speak to them, I say, how many of you think it hurt me to be mostly positive throughout this journey? And people shake their heads. Well, it certainly didn't hurt you. And I'm like, do any of you think it helped me? Show of hands. And you see the hands start to go up that say, hey, yeah, thinking and being positive most of the time. I mean, let's be real. I'm not that person that says, hey, you're going to be happy every single day. I dropped a show recently about facing cancer at the holidays and how do you deal with the anger that you're going to feel inevitably, especially as a young adult or someone in middle age. It's like, none of my friends are dealing with this right now. They have seemingly carefree lives and they're having fun while I'm dealing with hair loss and all the side effects of chemotherapy.
So you're a stage 4 cancer survivor, a podcast host, an author. What other roles do you play?
Yeah, I've touched on my fourth role. I listed as a professional speaker. And then my fifth role, I serve as an individual coach because, like I said, a lot of times people want to talk to you one-on-one. 6, a songwriter. That's kind of an interesting, unique one. Number 7, I counted myself as an adventure planner because after my cancer experience, the experiences in life and travel are what's really important. 8, I'm an aunt. I'm a proud aunt of one nephew named Carson, who will be 18 in 2022. 9, I'm a daughter and really proud of that role I play. And 10, I'm a sister.
So we always ask our guests too to expand on 3 of those roles that they're most looking forward to in the second half of life. And let's just keep going here. You put contributing family members. So you kind of combined all those roles as an aunt, daughter, sister, as a contributing family member. What is that you're looking forward to in the second half of life in terms of being with your family?
Yeah, definitely. What I'm finding as someone who contributes to their family, like we said, whether that's an aunt, a daughter, a sister, is just being there to help my family however I can. Whether that's giving advice to my nephew about college and trades and just life, growing up, giving advice to my sister too. We'll talk about our careers and compare and give each other tips too. And also, I found myself serving more as a caregiver, as my parents are aging. And so I'm someone who's never married and I didn't have kids after my personal experience with cancer. And so I just find myself serving more and more, helping my parents. My mom had fallen and broken an ankle and needed my help, of course, driving to and from appointments, surgeries. And this year had to have an eye surgery. And so just really stepping into that caregiver role has been important to me.
So you and I have some similarities here because I've never been married, no kids, yet different circumstances, obviously, here. So I imagine that as you're kind of looking forward to the second half of life, that all plays into this idea of wanting to be an adventure planner. And that's kind of the phase that I'm in right now as I've just got back from my trip from Portugal and Spain and Dakar, and I'm heading to Thailand and Singapore and who knows where after that, and just kind of transitioning into a new phase of my life. So what adventures have you planned? What are future adventures that you're looking forward to planning?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Like I said, I think when you're confronting your eventual mortality very suddenly, very unexpectedly, yeah, it really puts life in perspective. And you say, what are my priorities in midlife and beyond? And like I said, I'm not a things person. I don't care about stuff. And so I'm not really a shopper, but I love to travel and have experiences. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at just 33. Just 33 years young. And I had lymphoma. I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that unfortunately at stage 4 had spread all throughout my body, as lymph nodes are everywhere and had major organ involvement. So after 3 years of chemotherapy and losing all of my hair, I knew that 40, if I got there, would be big. And I knew I'd want to do something really special. And as I reflected on what is that really special thing, I realized that I've never been to Europe before. And so I realized I had an opportunity presented to me by a friend who was leading a group, a friend from college. And he said, "Hey, I know you like to sip on some wine." And he said, "I'm going to be leading a tour to Italy." And he said, it's like 8 days, or you can even add a couple days and do an extension, but you just hit all over Italy. Like we flew into Milan, we went to Rome, we spent a whole day at the Vatican, we went to Florence, we went to Venice, we were at Pisa to see the Leaning Tower, we were at Capri, saw the ruins in Pompeii, and I'm like, I'm in. Where do I sign up? How long do I have to make payments on this so I can afford it? But made payments and did that. And that was a huge just experience. Of course, I'll never forget getting to do all that. I also earned my master's degree a few years ago, specifically in health communication, so I could be better at serving others, breaking down complex medical information, making that more easily understandable. And when I earned my master's degree, I did an online program through Boston University. Well, I'm based in the Midwest, and so the program was online, but I thought, of course, I have to go out there when I walk and graduate. And graduation was around Mother's Day, and so decided to grab my mom, grab my only sister, and we made this huge mother-daughter trip out of it. And I am the travel planner that does the research and proposes all the options. And then people I'm traveling with decide what they want to do. And then I book everything and I have all the tickets in a folder every day. I'm very detailed. And so I hand that out. But we went out to Boston. We went to Cape Cod and spent time in Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, several days in Boston. Actually, I have 2 childhood friends in Boston. My old prom date lives out there from high school.
Did you stop by and say hello?
I was able to meet up with Yeah, I totally did. They're both married, both my childhood friends. They both have 2 daughters, which is really cool. And we actually all went to the Samuel Adams Brewery and then had a great time in Beacon Hill, had a great dinner, and, so much fun to see those childhood friends I grew up with. But, trips like that I plan. I love to go to spas. So if I can get away, earlier this year, I took a trip to Dallas because I'm really intrigued in history and had to go spend more time at Dealey Plaza, which is such a tragic spot, but also a very kind of riveting or mesmerizing, fascinating place just in the history of America, of our country.
The third role here that you put down was, being a cancer survivor. You're guiding so many others facing cancer through your podcast and through your coaching and through your speaking. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break because that's what you're here to talk about today is your battle with cancer and how you fought through it and how you have reinvented your life and how you're helping others face their own mortality and reinvent their life as well. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue hearing more from Joy Huber. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps us on our quest to reach the top of the podcast charts. Finally, since you can't make a mixtape for your friends and loved ones like you used to do, share this podcast with them instead. We hope our experiences resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, let's take a minute to be present with our breath. If you're listening somewhere safe and quiet, close your eyes and slowly inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do that one more time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and open your eyes. You feel better? We certainly hope so. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Brian on the bass is at his company holiday party, so I am here by my lonesome with author, speaker, and cancer survivor Joy Huber. And if you're thinking, I feel like these two sound different than they did in the first segment, that is because we have had to switch locations because we were having some issues, but I think we have them all resolved now. And I could tell you that I was getting frustrated because, as everyone knows out there who listens frequently, I am a perfectionist, so I want things to run smoothly. And Joy, I can only imagine, being diagnosed with cancer teaches you to go with the flow. So I cannot wait to hear your story here because I know that it's going to be an impactful one, not just for people who have cancer or people who know others who have had cancer, but even just people like me who take things so seriously, even little things, and make mountains out of molehills. And I can't even begin to imagine the emotional stress and navigating a cancer diagnosis. So can you share your story with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are right. We are just going with the flow here. And for me, it was no big deal because cancer does. It gives you perspective. And I think the thing is, we're all going to face something devastating like that in life, right? It's not pleasant to think about, but sooner or later, something, cancer, job loss, something will happen to all of us. And I look forward to talking about how we can respond or react to that. And like we said, go with the flow. But yeah, I was diagnosed with cancer and I found out I had stage 4 cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, very unexpectedly when I was just 33 years old, back in March of 2010. And so, of course, when you're that young, you're not expecting to get a diagnosis like that. And I had to embark or begin down a path of 3 years of chemotherapy that I endured, suffering the complete loss of my shoulder length hair. And I will add, I was single at the time. So ended up getting back together with an old boyfriend for a while I was going through my cancer treatment. But, just at the time I was going on dates with people and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, the complexities this adds of, do you tell? I'm going to have to tell if I'm going to be going out in wigs and having all this going on. How do you share that information? Does that drive people away? Will they stick around? And that's where, like I said, ended up getting back together with an old boyfriend for a while. So, one thing I really found going through cancer and hair loss was probably the most difficult, at least emotional thing that I'd gone through. Like I said, I was a single lady, and all of a sudden I find out, hey, you have beautiful shoulder length hair at the time. And one of my nurses said, that's going to come out in the next few weeks. And I just want you to know one of the medicines you're taking will cause your hair to come out. So you need to get prepared for that. So, of course, I was shocked or devastated at that. And what I ended up deciding to do is just really take control of it. And I think that's a great lesson for the listeners is control what you can in a crisis, right? When things are happening to you, there's a lot of things or a lot of times that things are out of your control. But if you can look at what's within my control and control what you can. So what I decided to do was actually cut my hair really short. And so I did that and I thought that might make it maybe not as hard because then I won't have like these long chunks or clumps of hair coming out, and cut my hair super short and actually really liked it. It was really cute. And then I thought, well, you can't like it too much because it's going to ultimately start coming out. We hit a point where I would have to vacuum my pillow in the morning. When you wake up, there'd just be a lot of hair on the pillow at night. And then I did ultimately take what I called the hair loss shower. And I talked about that in my book. And it was very traumatic. You step in the shower and when the stream of water hits your hair, I actually, I heard a splat sound because it was my hair coming out and hitting the shower drain. And that was super emotional. That's one of the moments that I remember actually crying the hardest throughout the journey. And again, it probably was because it wasn't within my control. This was happening to me involuntarily, such a shock. And so I put shampoo in my hands and I would start to suds my hair and it was just coming out in my hands. And I was just crying. And I think I might have sat down on the tub drain and just sobbed for a while. And I thought, am I going to be bald by the end of the shower? I remember I was scared to put my head back under the shower stream. So when you talk about complexities with recording, I have just different life experiences or just a different perspective where I am really good now at going with the flow, not sweating the small stuff, and just putting things in perspective as far as what really matters and what's okay. I did get out of the shower and I still had some hair left, blotted my head and still had some hair, but of course called my parents and was crying, and we went and had my head shaved the next day. So again, taking control of what you can instead of just letting it happen to you.
So a couple things here. I want to go back to, as you were dating and you had talked about how you knew that you were going to have to share this with people that you were dating. How did those conversations go? How did they react? How did you present it?
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's something I actually did a show recently on cancer in your career. And because, of course, everybody's probably going to work every day, and same thing there. It's like, who do I need to tell? Does my employer have to know this? Could it be a possible discriminatory thing against me? How do I tell? And so, yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person that tends to more make light or try to at least think and be positive. I'm not really going to get emotional with a complete stranger. But yeah, some people, I mean, I would just say, and really kind of let them know, hey, we just met. I'm certainly not expecting you to stick around for this completely unexpected thing that I've been hit with. I've been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and just going to have a lot going on right now. And like I said, I ultimately did end up, of course, I was sharing the news on my Facebook, and I started a caring bridge. And I'm from a very small town in Kansas or southeast Nebraska. And I think a lot of gossip went around and people here. And actually had an old boyfriend, a guy I met on my 21st birthday, reach out to me, or him and I kind of reconnected. And we ended up dating for a bit while I was going through my treatment. And that was actually really a good, I think, relationship to have at that time, or really comforting because he had known me even before cancer. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about. If you're single and going on dates, it's like, do I want to tell the person? Will they notice there's something different about my appearance? And a lot of times you do hear of people even that are married, or their spouse is having a really hard time helping them through it with all the changes that are occurring.
So going back to the hair loss, how did people come up to you? How did you navigate those conversations? Because I imagine people were having those conversations. It sounds like you were proactive in telling people, "Hey, I'm going through this," but even here, that emotion is still there, right? So I imagine at that point in time, it was particularly raw. So how do you navigate those conversations? How do you keep your spirits up, or do you even keep your spirits up while that is happening?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a key thing with cancer is I really tried to have more good days than bad. And again, I think that's a lesson for your listeners. No matter what crisis you're going through, whether it's facing cancer, a job loss, a divorce, the end of a relationship, whatever happens in midlife, kids leaving the nest, going on to college, it's really not what happens to you. It is the way you choose to respond. But I think, I mean, it would be unrealistic to think I'm going to have a good day every day. I'm going to have a positive attitude. And so give yourself permission to feel all the feelings that you're feeling. And there were times I would wake up and be like, I feel awful. I feel nauseated from chemo. Today is not a good, happy day. There were days that, of course, you're sitting cross-legged on the couch, you're crying, you're reaching for the ice cream, whatever the case may be. And you have to give yourself permission to feel that and to sit with those feelings, even if they're uncomfortable. And yeah, after that hair loss shower, and I had my head shaved, and now I'm bald, right? So I'm a bald 33-year-old single lady, and I didn't look awesome bald. I mean, some women, they look fine, they look good. I didn't look awesome. And so I was thinking, what can I do? Again, what's within my control? And you've heard the quote, laughter's the best medicine, right? So I thought, one thing women like to do is change their look. You probably know, women will go to the salon, they come back a different color, they come back drastically different hair. And I thought, this would probably be a period in life where it's never been easier to change my look. And I started thinking, what if I just got a whole bunch of different wigs? Like I could try different colors. I could be a redhead and see what I look like. I could try super short hair. I could try like even longer hair. And I ended up really kind of doing a cool thing that was featured in Coping with Cancer magazine. I got a whole bunch of wigs. And of course, at this time, social media was taking off, and my mom actually took pictures of me modeling all these different looks. So I would do short hair. I would do long hair. I did kind of the redhead, like, am I a saucy redhead? We included hats or caps, and we did all these different looks. And then here's what I did. I uploaded the pictures to Facebook because, of course, your friends are scattered all around, right? People I went to college with or buddies in my professional career. And I put them all on Facebook and even my Caring Bridge site, which I was using to communicate with everyone to provide updates. And I just said, hey guys, hair is all gone. Getting into the chemo here. I am bald and I am trying to find some new looks. So I said, let's have essentially a Facebook fashion show. And I said, why don't y'all vote and comment and help me pick your favorite looks of the summer? And it was a phenomenal way to get encouragement from friends, to get support. I mean, I did have some guy friends from college. They texted and they're like, I ain't touching this, because they're like, if I say something that's misconstrued as not supportive enough, they're like, I will be attacked in the community. So they're like, hey man, I think they were all fine. I'm not going to vote, but I want you to know I saw the Facebook. So it was more women that would weigh in and go, this hat is really cute. Or, ooh, I really like the chin length wig. That's really cute. But it was really, I hate to say it made hair loss fun, but it kind of did. It really transformed the experience from traumatic to one where I could gather support and encouragement.
I think that's something that really connects to what one of our favorite guests, Tom Cody, talks about, where he talks about reframing the situation. How you feel about something is how you're going to see the situation, and how you see the situation is what you're going to do, and what you do is inevitably going to be what you get. And then we just keep kind of going around in that loop right there. And I've said this before. It's one of my favorite quotes. I think I said it before, but Scott Welly says, never let a good crisis go to waste. And you really took this crisis and turned it into something fun. I think that really speaks to your spirit and your personality. Just even when we're off air, you have an energy about you that's really fun, and we've never met before, but this is so much fun to vibe off of your energy right here. I want to know, what were the fan favorites and what was your personal favorite?
Yeah. So actually, I was diagnosed with cancer in March. And so I began my chemo in April. And of course, by May, the hair was going. And I live in Nebraska. So I'm in the Midwest. And actually, it gets terribly hot, of course, in the summer. And so I really kind of like some of the shorter looks. I had a very short hair wig. I should send you a picture. But, and then there was a chin length one that I really thought was cute. Those got a lot of votes. Some of my friends really weighed in on some of the hats. One of the things I did in the summer is you can actually get what are called halos of hair. And what's interesting is a halo, if I explain this right for your listeners, it's going to have like the hair in the front or a little bit of hair hanging down on the sides. And it kind of gives you the look of hair, but then the bulk of your head is actually bald. And so it lets you stay cool in the summer, but there's a piece of Velcro you can attach a hat to. And so I would just put a hat on that covered the bald spot, right? And it still looks like you got hair and you've got a cute hat on. And some of my girlfriends, some of my female friends really like that. They're like, this is super cute. I love this cap. And, just a lot of fun. Like I said, I'd gotten back together with an old boyfriend for a while I was going through treatment. And he had a buddy over. And, I think the day the guy came by to pick up some parts or something, I had on a long red-haired wig and longer hair. And then the very next day, it was just hot, so humid, first thing in the morning. And I pulled on a wig with super short hair. And the same guy comes back to drop off or whatever. And you should have seen this guy do a triple take at me because he thought I was a different girl. And so he thought the guy I was going out with was seeing a couple ladies. And he's like, man, I thought you were someone different. And I was laughing. I said, that's kind of an interesting thing about going through hair loss with chemo is it is super easy to change your look. And like you said, you reframe it into something fun or something positive. I think it's Jack Canfield that wrote the Success Principles book. And he actually talks about a formula for life that I try to employ no matter what is happening to me. Like I said, whether it's a personal thing, whether it's a professional thing in my career. But Jack Canfield says E plus R equals O. And he says E is the event in life. So your cancer diagnosis or whatever you're thinking about right now. O is the outcome, but notice it's not E equals O. So it's not the event in your life that equals the outcome. Like, man, I got fired today. I lost my job. Now I'm depressed. Now I'm bitter. You have to factor in your response to that event. And that's what will ultimately dictate the outcome. Like, yeah, I got fired, but you know what? My response is, hey, I've got some emergency savings. I've got a plan. I didn't like the job anyway. So the outcome might be, I feel refreshed because now I have an opportunity to find a job or a career that I'm really going to enjoy.
Well, and that really ties into what I learned when it comes to mindfulness, because you could use that E plus R equals O, and the R could be different. So I always think that without mindfulness, it's event plus reaction equals outcome, because oftentimes a reaction is impulsive. But when we say event plus response equals outcome, an outcome is, or excuse me, the response is more of, hey, I'm going to take some time to collect my thoughts and evaluate the situation. And a lot of times this can happen very, very quickly if you have trained yourself to be able to take in all the information, and rather than go to that immediate impulsive reaction, to respond. And part of that comes from establishing a mindfulness practice. Research shows that. Just out of curiosity, and I don't know whether you do meditation or whether you do mindfulness, or do you just have a sunny disposition where you shit kittens and rainbows all day? Because that's kind of the way that I see you here. I don't know if that was your personality before or if it has exponentially grown to where it is today. I can only imagine that that's probably who you have always been.
Yeah, really, I have always generally been like, if you talk to someone who went to grade school or middle school with me and they see me today, they're going to say, she hasn't substantially changed. Like I said, I do think I'm more grateful, or I have this perspective of just putting things in perspective and going, this person's getting really worked up, but to me, it's not that big of a deal. And so I think I'm better at, what's that Taylor Swift song, Shake It Off. I think I'm better at shaking off those things. But honestly, sometimes I joke with my friends, my name is Joy. And it's like, I think that sets a expectation can you imagine if you were friends with someone, you're like, I have this friend named Joy. And the weird thing about her, she is the most angry, nasty, bitter person. It's like it just doesn't go together. So there's times I feel like, hey, I kind of need to live up to my name here. But like I said, hey, not every day is going to be a great day. And when I speak to groups, I always ask that. I say, hey, how many of you think it hurt me to try to be positive most days or some days throughout this journey? And you see people shake their heads going, well, no, it doesn't hurt. And I think we talked before about the body of evidence out there about the power of the mind-body connection and kind of what you think, thoughts become things, and what you think ends up happening. But like I said, I'm definitely not a person that's, always happy and upbeat. And I mean, there's certainly days, there's challenges, and you give yourself permission to have those off days. But I do hear a lot, people go, you're the happiest person I know, or like, you're the most positive person I know. And facing cancer in my 30s probably made that I like to say better. Some people might say worse, but I just really have an attitude of gratitude where I feel like I am really thankful for things.
Well, and you even say here that no one's happy they have cancer, but you can have cancer and still be happy.
Exactly. That's really what I discovered throughout my journey. That's a perfect. If you had to distill it down into a sentence, that's what I'd say. No one's happy they have cancer, right? No one's happy to get that shocking, devastating, difficult diagnosis. But what I really discovered, like we talked about through the hair loss and transforming that traumatic experience, you can have cancer and still be happy. And I think it comes back to what you said, not having that gut reaction or that kind of knee jerk reaction, but giving a little thought where you can have more of a thoughtful response. And like you said, tools like meditation, the mindfulness, very helpful. One thing I find is I actually journal a lot. I have a book I'm working through right now that's cool. It asks you the same question every day for 5 years in a row. So, like today, the question it asked me and has me respond to, it'll ask me that same question on this day again next year, and I will respond to it. And you can kind of look back and go, hey, what was my response last year? So, I find those to be useful tools versus maybe using social media and putting everything out there. You can still use a tool like a journal and keep it private and come back and reflect on your previous entries.
I love that it's the same question on the same day year after year. Where did you get this journal? Where can people find this journal? I as you're talking about this, I'm like very excited. I love the concept of this.
I think it's called A Question a Day or something like that. It's got kind of a teal or turquoise, light blue cover. But yeah, every single day it asks a question. And then, like I said, on this day, again, next year, it'll ask me the same question. And like I'm 45 right now, and it's a 5-year journal. And I thought, well, how cool to finish this right as I'm turning 50, right as I'm embarking on a new decade, and can kind of look back at this middle age and see what the thoughts were as I move from mid to upper 40s to embracing that new decade.
So you talk about journaling. Did you do any other type of therapy in order to navigate this situation? What was your support circle looking like during this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is one thing I find is you do want to talk to someone who's been there and you want to talk to someone who knows uniquely. Because I would meet friends from college or really good friends in Lincoln, and they would sit there and look at me and they would go, honestly, my grandma had breast cancer, but for me to sit here and say, I know or I understand what you're going through or how hard that is when you take a shower and your hair falls out, they're like, I am so sorry. I can't even relate to anything close to that. And so you realize, I think in middle life, it's like, hey, it's okay if you still have some of those same friends that you've always had from college. But as you all have different life experiences, it's okay to find new friends too. And I offer coaching on my Dose of Joy podcast. I have a Patreon account, of course, set up if anyone wants to chip in and support the show. But one of the tiers, one of the things I offer is that they can set up a personal call with me if they say, hey, I want to share my situation with Joy and get maybe some customized, tailored recommendations. But I always try to connect people to support too, because like I said, I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, if you had lung cancer or breast cancer or prostate, and you want to talk to someone specific, I know one group I recommend is Emmerman Angels, and I've actually volunteered with them and recently talked to a gentleman, but you do want to talk to someone who's been there and who really uniquely understands. So I think support groups are really important, whether that's a place you can go and gather in person, whether it's someone you're talking to on the phone or someone you're talking to over Zoom or in a virtual environment.
When we talked to Jody Farr not too long ago here, she talked about in her book, The Urgency of Awareness, that, we have these 18 normalities and then the opposite of that, things that are not normalized. And one thing that is normalized is being able-bodied. So I'm wondering, for you, did you have transitions physically where you went from being a healthy, able-bodied person to not being able to do some of the things that you used to do? And are you back to being able to do some of those things? Are there things that you just haven't been able to do in that time or since your diagnosis?
Yeah, I'll tell you one example I can think of has been in these COVID times, right? So I'm considering all the chemotherapy I've gone through. I've gone through 3 years of chemotherapy and, like I said, mid 40s right now. And I sometimes have to be reminded, hey, my immune system's a little bit different than maybe the standard someone in their mid 40s. And so, I mean, I'm very good at adhering to the recommendations, but, I'm vigilant about hand washing, using sanitizer, wearing masks, all of that. Of course, I've gotten 3 of my vaccines. I've gotten my booster at this point, but just my immune system is different. And there's times I'll be around a group of friends, and then if somebody's sick or if a couple people have colds, and then the next thing you know, a couple days later, I'm sneezing or coughing, and it's like, I was with these friends, and I think someone had a touch of a sniffle or something, and my immune system's just not what it used to be. Another thing I did notice is being such a kind of high energy or joyful person. Unfortunately, aside from a cancer diagnosis, one of the most devastating things that's happened in my entire life happened just a couple months into my treatment. My favorite grandparent passed suddenly or unexpectedly. So he wasn't ill. He actually passed in a farming accident. He was on a tractor going out to check some fields and things still as an 86-year-old because he was a real go-getter. And we were just super tight, super close knit. And like I said, I'd seen him that Sunday. He passed suddenly in this accident on Tuesday. And I had chemotherapy scheduled. And so I've told friends I had chemotherapy for stage 4 cancer and a funeral within 48 hours of each other. And I've often said, I hope that was the darkest days of my life because that really was a difficult time to have him gone. And, I tried to reschedule my chemotherapy. And my doctors were really strict with me about not moving it because they said, you have stage 4 cancer. They said, we don't know how else to say this. This is literally a matter of your life and death that you stick to your chemotherapy schedule and we don't move this. So I had to go to chemotherapy and then I came home to rest. And the next day was his visitation. And so they told me, they said, you've just had chemo. It's kind of like getting the wind knocked out of you. You've had all this poison infused in your system. And of course, it is a downer. I mean, I would have really an off week where I was very fatigued or not my usual high energy self. And so they told me, they said, plan to use a wheelchair at that service. You can still go, but you'll need to be in a wheelchair and have someone push you around. That way you're not up walking around overexerting yourself. And I am also stubborn. And I was like, I'm 33, I don't want to be pushed in a wheelchair. And so I was up walking around. But yeah, you have to make adaptations. We came home from the visitation and a lot of us were at my grandmother's house, and everyone was sitting around the dining room table or kind of visiting. And I'm like, I'm going to bed because I had overdone it and I knew I needed to get some rest. So yeah, you have to make those modifications or just consider what you've been through and be in tune with yourself to adjust accordingly.
The title of this episode is Facing Down Your Own Mortality. And we took that title from something that you have said before in Facing Down Your Own Mortality. And I can only imagine what being given a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and then shortly thereafter losing a grandparent in an accident does when it comes to you facing down your own mortality. So can you talk about that and those emotions, because I think that is an experience that a select few of people have. And I'm very curious to hear how you managed that, because I'll be very, very honest. The concept of death terrifies me because I am terrified of a world in which I do not exist. And I don't mean that arrogantly. It's just the concept that life goes on without me here is so weird. It's weird to think that hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people existed and they're not here anymore. So that makes me sweat even just thinking about all of that. And so that's a very large philosophical question that I imagine you had to face.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going, wow, I might have to come back for another episode so we can tackle some of these additional topics. But yeah, that's one thing. A cancer diagnosis really forces you to confront your eventual mortality. Like we said, at some point, that's something that happens to all of us. No one gets out of here alive, nor were we meant to. Were we meant to be on earth forever? But you're confronting your eventual mortality suddenly, very unexpectedly. It's right there staring you in the face. And that's one thing that I have helped others with, as I've coached or met with individuals, because I think it's really important that you ask yourself great questions when those fears, when those emotions surface. And you've probably done that as you reflect or as you journal or do meditations. You sit with those thoughts and emotions and you see what surfaces. And I've just found the question why to be so powerful. Because, of course, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I felt terrified. You have stage 4, and I really braced myself for this is it. I mean, stage 4 cancer, it's like I kind of expect someone to be telling me, you have 4 months, make the most of it, or all of a sudden giving me a time frame. You have 5 weeks, all of a sudden giving me a end of life that's coming very fast. That's coming a lot quicker than I anticipated. And that was one of the emotions I felt. Of course, I had a meeting with doctors where you're getting test results back. I mean, you are terrified, and it's almost a paralyzing, terrifying fear. There were times when I would be driving to appointments and I'd just have a dream or a vision. What if you didn't go to the appointment? What if you didn't show up? Why don't we go left? Why don't I go to Barnes and Noble? I love bookstores. Why don't I go into the cafe and get tea and just hang out with a magazine and not show up because I'm not sure if I can hear what they're going to tell me. So, of course, I thought, I can't do that. Burying your head in the sand again, where does that get you? So I went to the appointment, but I really had to sit with why? If you're scared of dying, why are you so scared of dying? And so I sat with that for a while. And you know what surfaced for me? We're being raw and emotional here today on the show. But what surfaced is I was scared of dying because I felt like I hadn't really lived. I was only 33. And that's what started coming back to me is you're scared to die because you haven't really lived yet. So then you continue asking yourself the questions and you surface great, really meaningful things. I mean, if you're ready to sit in the room by yourself and, have some Kleenex and blot some tears and just face all the emotions instead of trying to suppress them or reaching for a drink or, a coping mechanism or vice, like I said, feel the emotions that you're feeling. And I thought, well, I'm scared to die because I feel like I haven't really lived yet. I'm only 33. And then you start defining, well, what does really living look like? Did it look like, hey, I'd like to start a family? And for me, it actually didn't. I have an older sister who's married and has a son. And so I do have that youngster in my life or my only nephew. But for me, what surfaced was experiences. not going out and buying things, but having experiences, travel, seeing the world. But the answers to those questions, it's just so productive when you sit and keep asking yourself, why am I afraid to die? Well, I haven't lived. So what does living look like? What do I need to do? What do I need to change? And I think that's part of the happiness or the joyful spirit is, hey, I beat cancer and I came out of that living differently. And I'll really prioritize travel now. I mean, the money I spend on taking trips and I go solo and I have no problem with that, or I'll go with friends, I'll go with family. But, just really making that a priority and asking those great questions has been really useful for me.
Well, I think that's a perfect spot for us to take a break right here because you have gone on to do so many amazing things following this cancer diagnosis. So let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to learn about how this cancer diagnosis led to Joy doing so many cool things that allowed her to feel like she is living her best life. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
Thanks for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to help get you over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Oh, and don't forget to show yourself some love every now and then, too. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm here with Joy Huber, and Joy shared a really powerful story. And off air here, Joy gave me a very nice compliment. She said that she hasn't shared that story about her grandfather before. And so thank you for being open and sharing that here. And Joy said, don't be surprised if we're friends now moving forward, which I welcome. I need the positivity that you emanate from your soul. So I really appreciate that. It's such a wonderful compliment. One of the things that you mentioned is that this devastating cancer diagnosis has led to you doing so many cool things. And this season is all about reinventing yourself. And so can you talk about how this cancer diagnosis has led to your reinvention?
Yeah, that is a great question. And yeah, like I told you, so many cool things have happened. And I think that's just a great lesson or a great reminder. It's like, hang on for the ride in life. When something unexpected happens, you never know where that's going to take you or what's going to come out of that, whether it's new connections, relationships, opportunities. You just never know when you embark on something, whether that's willingly or involuntarily, in my case with cancer, where it'll end up going. So one example I would share is with my business. I had my own business doing training and public speaking, but I'll tell you, I was maybe struggling a bit with, hey, what differentiates you from all the other speakers out there talking about customer service or talking about managing people or assertive communication for women? And one thing I found is as I got through my cancer treatment, and this whole idea of facing cancer with joy really kind of hit me. I thought, wow, that's unique. Your name is Joy. This is like facing cancer with joy figuratively, like we talked about the mind over matter, the laughter being the best medicine, but also facing it quite literally, because especially with the podcast now, Dose of Joy, it's like people are facing cancer with joy, literally, me as their guide who's been there guiding and helping, comforting and soothing them as they go through it. So that's one cool thing, is it really helped me find my passion, my purpose in helping so many others, because that's another thing I noticed is individuals, if I know someone and they're friends with someone else or their family member gets diagnosed with cancer, and say I don't know their friend, but we share the common person, they will reach out to me and say, hey, my aunt just got diagnosed with breast cancer. Would you be able to talk to her? And I actually went back to school. I completed a program through Coach U to be professionally trained in coaching others. And so I had to take courses, in like listening to people. And I learned the word listen unscrambled spells silent. And that's really pretty cool. You take those 6 letters, listen, and you unscramble them, and it spells silent. And I think the lesson there is in order to be a good listener, you have to be silent. So you have to not be thinking about what you're going to say next, not be trying to interrupt or cut in, but you have to truly be silent and focused on what is that person trying to tell me? Not only their word choices, but their body language, as well.
15 years as an English teacher, and I never put together that listen and silent all have the same letters. That is wonderful. That like I am today years old just knowing that. That is phenomenal. So then in this coaching program, what is it that you're actually doing? What are you coaching?
Yeah. So typically we're coaching on potential or possibilities. Sometimes people do, like say with cancer, they want to run their individual situation by me. And a lot of times what I find those with cancer, you might be working full time. You might have a family with kids. You've got activities. Now you've got a cancer diagnosis. And one thing I find I've been real effective at guiding others to is just resources that they don't know about. So things that are out there that can help them. So a lot of times I'm helping people with coping, with finding resources, finding the support, finding the encouragement, whether that's connecting them to a support group that's specific to their cancer. In addition to a class on listening, I also took a class on questioning. And we talked about that earlier, where you ask that why, or you ask some really great questions, especially when people express emotions. And then I took courses in acknowledging, and I took courses in strategizing, partnering with others. Like I said, a lot of times we work on potential or possibilities. And it's like, well, what is still possible for you? One thing I did or I've done is dabbled in songwriting. I found that to be another way to express myself creatively. And not that I'm a singer or have that great voice to be an artist on the radio, but I found just myself writing down hooks or kind of ideas for songs. And actually, the song that plays at the beginning and end of my show, Dose of Joy, is a song I co-wrote. So I had the rights to that to put that in, and it's called Live Before I Die. And, it talks about just experiencing the full range of life. I want to laugh and I want to cry. The world is waiting there for me. I can do more than just survive. And it says, I want to see how far I can go when I put my heart in drive. Yeah, I want to live before I die. And like I said, I play that at the end of the show, but just found that to be another cool way to express myself. And so that's where I'm saying you never know when you embark on a journey, the possibilities or where it will evolve, what it will lead to. I authored the book Cancer with Joy, like I said, now the podcast Dose of Joy, coaching others. I speak to groups. Sometimes I'm asked to come into hospitals. I have done the songwriting. I actually moved away to the Nashville area for a year. Found out I didn't want to live that far away from family, but to live just north of Nashville up in Hendersonville for a year.
This is so incredible that you're doing all these things. And I myself am in this transitional period right now in my life, and it wasn't because of a cancer diagnosis. And I think that that's important for people to hear, that you don't need to have a significantly large life event happen to you in order to make some sort of transition, in order to reinvent yourself in some way. You did have this, and it sounds like it has spurred you on to go on to do these amazing adventures and to stretch out the pizza dough of your comfort zone. And I don't like the idea of being outside of your comfort zone. I like the idea of stretching the pizza dough of your comfort zone. And just kind of going back to the music, Brian and I love music, and Brian is very much a musician, and I dabble in that a little bit too. Were you taking lessons, or did you pick up an instrument after this? And the reason why I'm asking that is because it's interesting that you suddenly have this motivation to be creative. And I think that that's something as we get older. Greg Scheinman talked about this, where as we get older, we lose fun. We stop doing things that are fun. So where did this passion for music come from? Did you have an instrument? Were you just playing with it on the computer? Were you singing? Tell us more about that, because I think as we get into midlife, we start to lose fun. And as you faced on your mortality, you're like, I know I'm going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. Is, it's easy to fall into, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, if you have kids, it's easy to fall into, I get up and go to work all day. Maybe it's a soul sucking job or something that's draining that you don't love, but you're looking, you haven't landed something different yet. You can't leave because you got to make the mortgage. And yeah, a lot of people, I think in midlife just kind of go, is this it? I mean, there's got to be something more. What else is there? What can I do with that dream that I tucked away in the back of my mind? Maybe you can't move to Nashville and pursue music, but on what level can you do it? And when I started the podcast and it dawned on me, hey, I could put my own music in the show. That's really kind of a cool use of your talent or incorporating that. So I've always loved music. I mean, I remember singing in the school programs. I took piano lessons when I was little and loved playing piano, still sit down, to play the Christmas carols and the music. My parents used to take me to a home where my great grandma lived. And, and there would be all these older individuals and they would have lunch and they'd go to their rooms and lay down. And, maybe there wasn't anything going on. They'd take me in and I'd just volunteer and I'd just start playing music. And, these people that you think, well, they're older, they're probably tired, they want to lay down. They would come dancing out of their rooms, rocking up and down the hallways, and they would be out there. And my mom would be like, play that song again. And I'm going, I just played it, and she's like, yes, but they loved it. Play it again. So I've always had that where I've played piano and even played the alto saxophone in school for a while, but just found songwriting kind of coming to me just as you'd hear songs on the radio, or I'd be like, well, I have an idea for a song. And I started looking into it and I found NSAI, which is Nashville Songwriters Association International. And they have chapters in a lot of places. And I thought, this is crazy. I just have something I've written down here. I mean, it barely rhymes. I don't even know. This is probably awful. But like you said, stretching the pizza dough. And I just thought, you know what? Is life going to pass me by or am I going to have some fun? And so you put yourself together with your sheet and you go, I know this isn't any good, but, and I went to a meeting and I read some lyrics and there was a guy there that was an awesome guitar player. And he's like, can I see that lyric sheet? And he took a look and, I didn't really think anything of it. And I'm like, nice guy, awesome guitar player. And then next month I went back and he's like, I want to play something for you. And he became my first co-writer and we began collaborating and actually wrote a song called No Pain that ended up being played at both of my grandparents' funeral because they loved it and had a personal connection to it. So, again, is it commercially viable? Is it songs that I have on the radio in Nashville where I can say, hey, I wrote that? No, but you find a way to take your passion and fit it into life. I think one important thing to say that cancer taught me is the clock's ticking. I mean, it's ticking for all of us. And you can bury your head in the sand and avoid that, la, 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 I don't want to think about that. Well, it's still ticking, it's still happening. So it's like, how can we seize life, seize the moment versus letting it pass us by, and get out of the rut of just going to work, going to the kids' activities, rinse and repeat. What can we do to embark on some of these passions in life and pursue them? I mean, how many die with a dream still inside of them that they never had the guts to chase? And it's like, who cares? I mean, I think personally, I don't know about you, Billy, but I think you're successful if you have a dream and you pursue it. Like success is not, oh, I'm a published author or, whatever. It's, I had this dream, I pursued it. Nothing big happened, but you know what? I did it. I went after it instead of just wondering at the end of life, I wonder what would have happened if I would have tried this.
I think that ties into something that resonated with me as you were telling your story right there. So you have this passion then for songwriting, and you decided to go where people are writing songs. I mean, between Nashville and Austin, you're talking about two of the most widely acclaimed music cities in the United States. So you surrounded yourself with like-minded individuals, and here you were able to turn some lyrics into a song thanks to the help of this guitar player. And that's why I'm eternally grateful to Brian, because this podcast has been something that I've wanted to do for a while, but I knew that I needed a like-minded person in my life in order to have it come to fruition. And when I approached Brian about it, he was all in. And I think that's so really important for people to recognize, is that if you have these passions that, and this is a word that I think it's overused, but I also am starting to understand the power of it. If you want these passions to be manifested into existence, that you need to speak them, you need to put them out into the universe, because when you do that, then again, this is going to sound hokey, but the universe listens, and it may send you someone your way that can help make that passion a reality. And again, those are all things that 3 years ago I would have never said at all. But I really do feel that way, and I'm feeling that way more and more, as I get older and as I'm going through this transitional period. A big part of that for me was, I guess, manifesting this trip that I took overseas while I've been on leave, right? And that's something that you said in the last segment. You were really looking forward to taking a big trip because you had not yet been to Europe. And I didn't go to Europe until I was 37. My family didn't travel when we were younger, so that wasn't really an important thing for me. But now as I'm older, all I want to do is travel. So you took a trip to Italy, it sounds like. Can you talk about that trip?
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I went to Italy when I was 39 and I turned 40 the next month. So had never flown overseas. I've been to Canada or Puerto Rico and have taken cruises that have docked or had those cruise ship stops in like Roatan, Honduras. And so gotten off some places in Central America. But I have friends from college that I remember one of my buddies, he went backpacking through Europe, a semester when we were in college. And honestly, at the time, I didn't have the resources to do that. But being diagnosed with cancer when you're 33, and I think we talked about earlier, it's like I knew when I beat the cancer, when I found out I was in remission. And again, it's like, hey, could that positive attitude have helped me? I think possibly in beating this and getting in remission, but did chemotherapy for a few more years. I did maintenance chemo and then just started thinking as 40 was coming around the bend, had never gotten married, hadn't settled down and had kids. And that's a great thing about being single, living that life is you're free to travel. A friend of mine had reached out and he was actually coordinating a tour. He was a teacher and putting together a tour where like students could sign up, and he knew I like a glass of wine, and he knew I love pasta or pizza and all of that. And he also knew I'd been through all this in my 30s and, just had never been overseas. We're friends from college. Anyway, he reached out and he's like, hey, thought I'd let you know I'm putting together a trip to Italy, wine, gelato, pizza, pasta. He's like, I thought maybe you'd want to go. And I'm just like, when is it? And I figured out it was the summer I turned 40. And I just knew. I mean, like you said, you put it out there in your mind or even speaking it, and the universe has a way of bringing it back or manifesting. And I thought, I was diagnosed with cancer in my 30s. I've been wanting to do something big for turning 40 if I made it, since I made it there. And it's like, I didn't know exactly what that would be. But then my college buddy presented this opportunity to me. And I'm like, how much? And of course, he says, well, there's payment plans available. And I think I made payments every month to kind of whittle down the balance, and which is awesome. It was prepaid fun. And I came home and I had all these awesome pictures and memories. And I didn't get the huge credit card bill ever because the trip was really paid for. But we ended up going over to Italy, flew into Milan. And thankfully, the tour, could add an extension, a couple of days, which I did, because I thought if I've flown all the way to Italy, I'm going to take in as much of the country as I can. Went all over. We're in Milan, have a picture in front of the cathedral, then went on to Venice and did the gondola boat ride, and just so many amazing, all over. Went into Florence, the Duomo there, went out to Pisa so we could stand by the Leaning Tower and, the Basilica, be there. We went into Rome. We spent a whole day at the Vatican. Then the extension let us go on to like Pompeii and see ruins. We were on the Amalfi Coast, riding in one of those buses where you're kind of going, whoa, I hope this doesn't go over the edge, some of these roads. And we're in this long bus, but ended up taking the boat ride to Capri, walked around, where Mrs. Onassis was. And I am fascinated by the Kennedy family. So it was really fun to get to be in that area. But yeah, you've got to make a plan and ask yourself, what's important to me? What does living look like? And then how do I break that down like into these baby size manageable steps to make it happen?
So, Joy, we're going to get you out on this here. You have been such an inspiration to so many people, especially people who have been diagnosed with cancer or have family members who have been diagnosed with cancer. What are your number one do's and don'ts when they get diagnosed?
Ooh, excellent question. So yeah, I like to share these because I definitely did the don'ts, and I don't want other people to do those if they can learn from me. So, when I heard the word cancer, I think I did what a lot of us do. You Google, right? Google knows everything. There's so much information out there I can find. So I start Googling, and the problem is, who provides that information? I mean, if someone's good at search engine optimization, they may not have the medical background, but they might be able to get their information to spread or go like wildfire, and it comes up in the search engine results, even if it's not credible. So a site I love to share, I always tell people, don't Google. Right? That's the number one don't. Don't Google your diagnosis. You want to go to credible sites and find medical, helpful information. So I always tell others cancer.net. And it doesn't seem like that many people know about it. Everyone knows cancer.org because that's the American Cancer Society's website. But cancer.net actually provides oncologist approved information. And I pull or cite from that a lot in a lot of my shows. So number one, don't Google. Go to a site like cancer.net or something with credible information about the type of cancer you're facing. Then my number one do is do get a second opinion. And I think that is critical when you're dealing with cancer, that you have another professional that will confirm that diagnosis and agree on the proposed treatment plan before you go through all this chemotherapy, before you lose your hair or your hair falls out. So I actually recommend a site from U.S. News and World Report, but you can look up, the best hospitals for cancer treatment and see if there's anything close. But definitely the oncologist I went to, he actually suggested I go to the University of Nebraska Medical Center, which is a wonderful, wonderful treatment facility in Omaha. And that's where I went for my second opinion. But I recommend that you get that second opinion before you embark on a treatment plan.
Well, my number one do for our listeners is to check out the Dose of Joy podcast. I hope people heard my energy shift from the first segment throughout the show because at the beginning of the show, I was frustrated with the technology, but the more and more you sit here and talk with Joy, her energy just fills you up. And Joy, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show. Like the Dose of Joy podcast Facebook page for free, helpful content daily. Joy also has a Patreon account that we will link in the show notes along with her podcast. Some options from her Patreon include opportunities to have a personal call with Joy and to even be coached by Joy on an ongoing basis. Joy, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it was a true honor to get to speak to you. I've listened into the show. I'm a fan. You have on a lot of great guests and share a lot of great information that's really applicable to me. Like I said, 45 now, so right there in the part of middle life where you go, there's got to be something more. What more could there be? So glad that I came upon the show and became a fan and then got to connect with you. And when you said, hey, would you be on the show? Really jumped at the chance to get to connect and get to share some hopefully helpful and inspirational content. Like I said, no one's happy they have cancer, but you can't have cancer and still be happy. And you could almost replace cancer with anything you're going through in midlife. So seize the moment and find a way to eke out or make it happen in your life. And thanks for having me on.
I think that's the moral of the story here, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you have a story, we want you to share it with us. So feel free to contact us. You can email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. We also have a Facebook page. You can check out the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We're on Twitter at Mindful Midlife. Get in contact with us. We want to hear your story. We want you to share your story with others. So for Joy, for Brian at the holiday party, I hope you're having a great time. This is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the checkmark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved.